Good morning, everyone. Whether the Unitarian Church of Evanston is your spiritual home or you are seeking comfort and connection in uncertain times, we are grateful you are with us. We are an inclusive and welcoming community seeking truth in love and striving to nurture the human spirit for a world made whole. We are guided by our principles and values which remind us, in every moment and through every challenge that each of us matters, and that we are all connected through the vast and beautiful web of existence. Together, let us remember our oneness, our kinship with one another, and may we hold one another in heart and mind with tenderness and careful attention. There are many links of connection in the comments section, including credits for readings, to virtual religious education, for donations, and to be added to our email newsletter list. A few announcements this morning. The all-church Zoom meeting will be on Wednesday at 5:30. We'll send a reminder email in the afternoon on Wednesday with a link. We'll hold a virtual coffee and conversation after this service for 30 minutes on Zoom. You can find the link in the comments below or from the newsletter. And now I invite you to get a pen or pencil and some paper ready, get your chalices ready, and set a place for yourself and your family as we join in beloved community.
Begin with these words from Richard Gilbert. Loneliness is our common fate. There is no escape. But out of that loneliness comes our salvation, for we love out of our fear of being alone. As long as human beings people the earth, we can be assured that in our loneliness there is also love. Deep, infinite love, waiting to be tapped, to water the barren brown lawn of our loneliness, love which shrivels if kept to the self, which flourishes only if it is given away. I need you. You need me. I know it. You know it. What are we waiting for? Welcome to worship.
$525,600 525,000 moments so dear.
525,600 minutes. How do you measure our year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, and laughter, in strife. In 525,600 minutes. How do you measure
As Janice, Amira, and Miles Milanovich light this chalice in northern Illinois on the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes, such as the Miami, Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Sauk, and Fox, also call this area home. We name these in honor and respect. May this flame we light remind us that every one of us can bring the light of love to the world. May this clear flame be a symbol that every heart can burn bright with joy, peace, and harmony. And stay in us. Every one of us can be a blessing to the world. Please join in the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Today's time for all ages is Somebody Loves You, Mr. Hatch, by Eileen Spinelli and illustrated by Paul Yalowitz. Mr. Hatch was tall and thin and did not smile. Every morning at 6:30 sharp, he would leave his brick house and walk 8 blocks to the shoelace factory where he worked. At lunchtime, he would sit alone in a corner, eat his cheese and mustard sandwich, and drink a cup of coffee. Sometimes he brought a prune for dessert. After work, he would make 2 stops: at the newsstand to get the paper, and at the grocery store to buy a fresh turkey wing for supper. After supper, he read the paper, took a shower, and went to bed early. He keeps to himself. That's what everyone said about Mr. Hatch. One Saturday, when Mr. Hatch stepped onto the porch with his dustpan and broom, he got a surprise, a package wrapped in brown paper. He had never spoken to the postman before. "Thank you, Mr. Goober," he said. Mr. Goober smiled. "You're welcome. I always enjoy delivering packages." Mr. Hatch tore the brown paper off. Inside was a white box, which he opened to find another box. This one was heart-shaped, shiny red. It was filled with candy. Something fluttered on the porch floor. It was a little white card. He picked it up. It said, "Somebody loves you." Only then did he remember that this was Valentine's Day. Mr. Hatch wondered and wondered. Now, who would send this to me? He was all alone. He had no friends. And yet someone had sent him a Valentine. Who? Who? He put the box on the coffee table and tried to do some dusting, but every time he left the room, he had to keep peeking to see if the box was still there. He dusted and dusted, and the dust cloth seemed to whisper, "Somebody loves you. Somebody loves you." At last he flung the dust cloth away and exclaimed, "Why, I've got a secret admirer." And then he did something he had never done before. He laughed. He laughed and danced and clapped his hands. And then he took a piece of candy from the box and ate it. Mr. Hatch changed his shirt and found some old aftershade in the bottom of a drawer. He splashed it on his face. He picked out a yellow tie with blue polka dots and put it on. And then he went for a walk. Maybe, he thought, I will meet the person who sent me the candy. Of course, no one had ever seen Mr. Hatch wearing a tie, or smelling of aftershave, or smiling, so he got a lot of attention. On Monday, it was back to work. At lunchtime, Mr. Hatch sat in the middle of the cafeteria. He spoke to everyone and passed out chocolates from the heart box. On his way home, as usual, he stopped at the newsstand. Mr. Smith handed him the usual newspaper. "I think I'll have a pack of mints," said Mr. Hatch, not as usual. Mr. Smith was shocked. "Was that you speaking, Mr. Hatch?" "Indeed it was," said Mr. Hatch. "And if you don't mind my saying so, Mr. Smith, you don't look very well today." Mr. Smith recovered from the shock to reply, "You're right, I don't feel very well. I have a cold. I was supposed to go to the doctor's this afternoon, but the stand has been so busy I haven't had the time." Mr. Hatch smiled. "Why, I'd be happy to watch the stand for you while you go." Mr. Smith could hardly believe his ears. "Would you?" "Certainly. Just show me what to do." And so Mr. Hatch ran the newsstand for an hour. He wondered if any of the women who stopped to buy a paper or a magazine or a candy bar had sent him the mysterious Valentine. When Mr. Smith returned, Mr. Hatch made his usual stop at the grocery store. "I'm a little tired of turkey wings," he told Mr. Todd. "I think I'll have a nice fresh slice of ham." Mr. Todd weighed the meat and wrapped it. "You look worried," said Mr. Hatch. "I am," said Mr. Todd. "My little girl is late. She hasn't come home from school yet, and I can't leave the store to look for her until my wife arrives." "Goodness, why didn't you say so? I'll go look for her." And so Mr. Hatch walked to the school and found little Melanie Todd by the swings and brought her home. After supper, Mr. Hatch did not bother to read the paper. He decided to bake brownies instead. It would be nice to have brownies to share with the people at the factory. As he baked, the warm chocolate smell of brownies floated through the neighborhood. Children gathered around Mr. Hatch's house, sniffing the air. "Well, I suppose the factory can wait," said Mr. Hatch as he looked out the window. And he brought out 2 platefuls. When the parents came to gather their children, they had some brownies too. It turned out to be a picnic in Mr. Hatch's backyard. He dusted off an old harmonica and played songs he remembered from his boyhood. Everyone danced. And so the days and weeks went by. When Mr. Hatch wasn't smiling, he was laughing. And when he wasn't laughing, he was helping someone. And when he wasn't helping someone, he was having a party in his yard or on his porch. He seemed to have forgotten who had sent him the Valentine. Then one afternoon, Mr. Goober, the postman, came to his door. His face was very serious. "I am upset," he said. "My supervisor is very angry with me. Do you recall the package I delivered to you? On Valentine's Day, I think it was." "Yes, I believe so," replied Mr. Hatch, beginning to feel a little uneasy. "I don't suppose you still have it," said Mr. Goober sadly. "As a matter of fact, I still have the box. The candy is gone, though. Why do you ask?" "I'm afraid I delivered it to the wrong address. It was supposed to go to another house." Mr. Hatch recalled tearing off that brown paper. It had never occurred to him to look at the address. He fetched the heart-shaped box and gave it to the postman. "I do hope your supervisor won't be angry with you now." The postman was heading down the sidewalk when Mr. Hatch called from his porch. Mr. Goober, I forgot something." And he gave the postman the little white card. Alone in his living room, Mr. Hatch sighed. Nobody loved me after all. Then he read the paper, took his shower, and went to bed early. The next morning at 6:30 sharp, Mr. Hatch left his brick house and walked 8 blocks to the shoelace factory. At lunchtime, he sat in the corner by himself, ate his cheese and mustard sandwich, and drank a cup of coffee. After work, he stopped at the newsstand for his paper, but he did not speak to Mr. Smith. And when he ordered his turkey wing from Mr. Todd, he did not smile. Nor did he pat little Melanie Todd on her head, or bake brownies, or have picnics or parties, or play his harmonica anymore. Everyone whispered, "What's wrong with Mr. Hatch?" Mr. Goober, the postman, told them about the mistaken delivery. "We love Mr. Hatch," said Mrs. Dunwoody. "He gave us flowers for our garden and helped mend our fence." Mr. Smith told everyone how Mr. Hatch watched his newsstand. Mr. Todd told everyone how Mr. Hatch found his little girl. All the children remembered the wonderful brownies and most of all his laughter. "Poor Mr. Hatch," they said. "What can we do?" Then Mr. Goober announced, "I have an idea." On Saturday morning, Mr. Hatch woke to a bright and sunny day. He put on his overalls and went out to the porch with a dustpan and broom. He couldn't believe his eyes. All over the porch were red and white hearts and pink bows. There were boxes of candy on the chairs and yellow streamers flowing from the ceiling. And sticking out of his mailbox was a shining silver harmonica. The yard was full of people, happy, smiling people. They were holding up a huge sign with hand-painted letters. It said, "Everybody loves Mr. Hatch." Mr. Hatch dabbed at his tears with his handkerchief. "I do believe," he sniffed, "somebody loves me after all." And then he smiled. And then he laughed. And then he hurried down to be with his friends. The end.
Thank you, Kathy. These are the joys and sorrows that have been submitted through the Google form found on the homepage of our website. Alternatively, you can send an email to Reverend Eileen or Reverend Susan Francis. From members of that covenant group, our thoughts and prayers go out to fellow group member Chris Chambers as he continues his too long and too complicated health recovery process. I'm glad to know that he's in good spirits and getting good care. From Kristen Larson, a concern. Craig fell at the house on Thursday, hitting his head. He was taken to Northwestern ER for a CAT scan and is fine, but was admitted because this is his fourth fall since coming home last October. And despite being in outpatient rehab since January, Craig's not progressing as an outpatient. In fact, they think he may becoming weaker. We thought it might be exhaustion from the rehab schedule, but it may be his failing heart. Last Tuesday, Craig had a tachycardia event and required a 911. So Thursday's fall was our second ER visit this week. Next week, Craig will enter rehab as an inpatient, and we hope he will return to Shirley Ryan. Cards are appreciated. From Kristen Lems, celebrating the life of activist balladeer Anne Feeney, who died last week in Pittsburgh from COVID-19. Wherever people were organizing for justice, the Immokalee workers, the Wisconsin State Capitol uprising, women's rights movements for Black lives, ending the wars, Anne was there singing on the front line. Taken too soon, never forgotten. We know that these are not the only joys and sorrows that are on our hearts. Let's take a moment of quiet now to read to ourselves the joys and sorrows that have been added to the chat. We hold these together in care and tenderness. And I invite you to say aloud the names of those you are holding in your heart, those who are sick or who have died, as we let their names gather on the winds to be held in this community that knows no walls. We expand our celebrations and lessen the burden of our grief. I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation with these words by the Reverend Wayne Arneson. Spirit of love, in you we have our being. Help us to recognize the love that surrounds us. Help us to see ourselves as the loving people we are and can be. In silence, now we bring to our mind's eye the people who have loved us and continue to love us. People who are not here with us today, but those whose love we sometimes take for granted. People who might be within our circle of love. Could we but extend it a little further? In silence now, we hold these people in our hearts. In returning from silence, we ask that our hearts be opened to all those whose names and faces have crossed our minds. The love we share with the people in our lives may be our abiding teacher.
let me be a part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give.
Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give.
UCE remains a vital part of the world in our community, and because we continue to need one another in the blessings of community, we take this time to invite you to give to our shared plate. Today's offering will be shared with the Interfaith Action of Evanston, whose mission is bringing communities of faith and spirit together to serve people who are hungry and homeless. You can text to give, send in a check, or give from our website. If you send in a check, please indicate in the memo line if your check is for the shared offering, pledge, capital campaign, or some other giving. Please give as generously as you are able, and may what you give bring you joy.
I'm very happy to have won the serendipity auction entry to select with Gregory a piece for him to play on a Sunday morning. When I was perhaps 12 years old, I happened to watch the fanciful 1945 movie about the life and music of George Gershwin. The next day, I went downtown to Rose Records and bought Leonard Bernstein's version of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, my first purchase of a classical or semi-classical record album. This particular song, The Man I Love, is another favorite. It was written as a show tune, yet lends itself to a semi-classical interpretation with plenty of room for the pianist to express their individual take on the music. How could I not want to experience Gregory playing it and share it with all of you? Happy Valentine's Day.
Our reading today the title is on a riff on an old country western style song called Love in All the Wrong Places by David Blanchard. Most of us look for love in only the most obvious places, and as a result, most of us come away disappointed. It is as if we were still grade school kids counting Valentines as a measure of what matters. The love that matters is not typically the subject of sonnets or love songs. There can be love in being told we are wrong. There can be love in sharing regret. There can be love in asking for help. There can be love in communicating hurt. There can be love in telling hard truths. Most of us find it painful to live at this level of love, but it can be there even in these most unlikely places. Isn't the kind of love we've been promised, and it isn't the kind of love that we've been promised in fairy tales of princesses and fairy godmothers, but it is the kind of love experienced by frogs and dwarfs. It's the sort of love that can bring us closer to finding the missing pieces of ourselves that we need to make us whole. Some of the most loving things I've experienced, I haven't been ready for and nearly didn't recognize. A few of them I didn't want, but all of them have changed me, transformed some part of me, filled in a place that I didn't even know was empty. When the Valentine has been tucked away in a drawer, the candy eaten, the flowers faded and gone, there will be other legacies of love that will last as long as we do, because they have brought us to know an element of love in life. Part feeling, part idea, part mystery that once known is ours to keep.
This is what it is to live in love. This is what it is to live in love. One of many branches in an ancient tree, reaching up and out while the roots grow deep. This is what it is to walk with love. This is what it is to walk with love. Step by step we move in thoughtful prayer, even if we stumble on this journey shared. Lift up your voice, sing from your heart, from sadness to joy, from wherever you are. We live in love, open our hearts and come welcome in from wherever you are. This is what it is to heal our world. This is what it is to heal our world. Single drop of water on a bed of stones joins with all the others and the river flows. Lift up your voice, sing from your heart, from sadness to joy, from wherever you are. We live in love, open our hearts and come welcome in from wherever you are. In
A long time ago, in a land not so far away, I was beginning my sophomore year at the University of Minnesota Duluth. I found myself in the middle of what Judith Viors referred to as one in one of her children's books as a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. There was too much to do, too little time, not enough meaning in my life in general, and on and on. Somehow I found my way to the windowless cubbyhole, which was the office of my advisor, a young first year instructor in the speech department. His name was Jack Huntley. He is now deceased, but at the time, even then, he was an old soul. He sat patiently as I poured out my tale of woe and isolation, and finally, sensing that my plight was more existential than particular, he offered the following. Karen, he said, you know what you need to do when you're having a day like this? You need to walk down the hall with a big grin on your face and say over and over to yourself, I'm a lover and you don't know it. I'm a lover and you don't know it. And pretty soon, you'll meet someone who does know it. And that will make all the difference. At that moment, some deep inner wisdom in him connected with some deep inner wisdom in me. And although these were the days heavily dominated by my awareness of my budding sexuality and my consciousness of the issues of romantic and erotic love, I had not the slightest question about what he was saying. I knew that he had just given me permission to open up to a truer, more expansive truth of what it was to be a lover. It was an encouragement to claim and express a more expansive understanding of love. Part of what had been holding me in was my sense that to be a lover applied to being in a specific kind of relationship in which love would be present under a certain particular condition and not under others. Jack simply brought to my attention that much of what I needed was right out there, free as air. There was not anything magic about what he encouraged me to do, I suppose, except that it worked. It worked then. It has worked countless other times since. When I am down, it helps me to open up to the loving around and within me, and then allow it a means of expression. It is surely, as my long deceased colleague Arthur Foote wrote, a word so loosely mouthed, so notoriously abused and overused, one might wish to avoid, yet there really seems to be no way to do so. The use of the phrase, I love you, in any language is as loaded a phrase as ever there has been. It has been second-guessed and analyzed and questioned, used as a weapon and a trigger for guilt and obligation. In the context of romantic love relationships, it has even become associated with a turning point that signals the possibility of a deeper commitment, an exclusivity in which love is a commodity bestowed and withdrawn at will. Sadly, this context for expressing love has come to dominate and shape our understanding of the importance of love expressed. Some time ago, a friend of mine introduced me to The 5 Love Languages, The Secret to Love That Lasts by Gary Chapman. It was one of those handy internet moments in which the meaning was so apparent I didn't need to read the book. Chapman reminds us that there are multiple ways to express and receive love, and that we sometimes miss the mark when we do not identify to those who love us just what it is that feels like love. And we do not often elicit that information from them. Chapman identifies the 5 love languages as words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service, quality time, and physical touch. Words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service, quality time, and physical touch. What Chapman is suggesting is that sometimes we do not feel loved because our loved ones are using a language that we have a hard time experiencing as love. Fewer gifts, please. I just need more hugs. What would really feel loving would be if you took out the trash without being asked. You can do your own internet search of this if this is new to you, but I raise this here because I believe that the flow of love, the connections of giving and receiving love are often so confused and limited, so mismatched between intention and reception, that we seem to be withholding love when it is just about not wanting to get it wrong. And there is ample reinforcement for the getting it wrong thing. There are countless cultural resources that skew our attitudes about expressing love. For example, today is Valentine's Day. For many of us, our earliest memories of this day are from the simultaneously dreaded and anticipated ritual of the schoolroom Valentine exchange. The torture, of course, began well in advance of the day itself with the recognition of social inequality. We would be given a number of students in our the number of students in our class, but not a class list. All Valentines were to be anonymous. In my class, there were two girls with seriously overachieving mothers who insisted on the production of handmade individual Valentines for every member of the class. Sometimes they were frosted sugar cookies with little cinnamon hearts around the edges. We knew who those were from. Most others relied on the range of store-bought variety that could be cut out or punched out of printed sheets with cartoon characters holding signs that read, "Be mine." And some students just did not come to school that day because they had nothing to offer in kind. The next day, they would be forced to receive their envelope of generic anonymous greetings. I wonder if they felt loved in that gesture. I remember counting the Valentine cards to make sure I'd gotten one from everyone in my class, and when coming up short, wondered who had not had one for me. I trust that you all have your stories of Valentine's Day past, and I dare say they each come with a message about the expression of love that, to some degree or another, has spilled out into the other 365 days of the year, for better and for worse. These lessons are complicated. Lessons about expectation and disappointment, about pleasure and pain and rejection and affirmation and opportunities seized and missed, of hitting the mark and falling short. It is hard to convince ourselves that love is somehow is not somehow a expression of perfection. Clearly, some of the messages that come to us through our romanticized Christian culture reinforce that, like the particular words from 1 Corinthians that is touted as the love gospel. As lovely as it sounds, it is a passage that has done a real number on the Western world's understanding of human love. Love, we are told, is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. This passage is never more jarring to me than when it is suggested as a reading for a wedding ceremony. On one hand, where better to invoke the qualities of perfect love than at a wedding celebration when we are awash with so many manifestations of love that we can hardly hold them all? Unquestionably, love is the medium which surrounds and informs marriage at its best. But the love that was referred to in the Corinthians passage is not really about human love. It is the manifestation of divine love that the Apostle Paul was attempting to infuse into the work of the early church. It is love, divine and perfect. It is patient and kind, not jealous and boastful, not arrogant or rude, not irritable or resentful. Invoked as an ideal for human love, it sets us up to feel inadequate from the start. Anything less than those things is not worthy of expression. Marriage is, of course, the most intimate and complicated relationship that exists. We bring to it our whole and imperfect selves. We bring our ideals and our dreams, our hopes, our attitudes, our habits, our preferences, our views of the world forged from a whole set of experiences, many of which predate this magical connection we make with another person. If we are lucky, we find someone with whom we actually share the essence of those things and build a marriage on that common ground by creating day by day new dreams and hopes and attitudes and habits and preferences and worldviews together. All of this while forging meaningful careers and perhaps becoming parents, attending to the generation before us, maintaining meaningful relationships with those who care about us. So even as human beings with high personal standards, I'm guessing all of this might exact some days some impatience, some crankiness, a bit of resentment, a dash of irritation, not to mention bad breath and cold feet. My concern about Paul's view of love is that it implies that where these things are present, there is not love. That anything less than the qualities of loving he puts forth in his letters to Corinthians find us wanting. Where is the part that talks about the reality that when we are most unlovable, we are most in need of love? Not feeling all of those godlike attributes towards someone behaving badly does not mean that love is suspended. We are not failing when love is hard to express and receive. It is love that keeps us moving toward repair, that sets boundaries against abuse, provides meaningful feedback, forgives, and moves on. It is love that holds us in our broken places. In love, there is no falling short. What I say is that it is the love we find in imperfection that is most divine. In and out of marriage, among friends and partners, parents and children, and perhaps most of all, strangers whose stories we do not know. Love is there in all the ways we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again and again. It is what lubricates the squeaky wheels of frustration and premature judgment and allows us to laugh at our shortcomings and claim the promise of self-improvement. It is the light that shines out of the darkness of self-doubt to illuminate the rocky, root-filled paths of compromise. Human love is expressed sometimes in romantic and poetic verse, but more often in the awkward and grace-filled efforts to choose our children and our parents, our partners and our friends, and indeed the strangers to whom we might extend ourselves in loving kindness every day, to begin again and again in this fascinating and challenging journey toward love. Recently, a friend sent me a link to a website called Willow, which included some tools for capturing and expressing important ideas and values. One of the tools is called the 5-Minute Love Letter, It seems like a perfect antidote to the reservations imposed by grade school Valentine exchanges. So I offer this as my Valentine to you. If you have a piece of paper, take it out now and make a note of these prompts that Adam will put on the screen as I read them aloud. At the end of the service, after the coffee hour or before, set a timer for 5 minutes and follow the prompts. Do it again and do it again. So choose someone who matters to you. Begin with dear and their name. Thank you for what I love and appreciate about you, a way you enhance my life. Please forgive me for my hopes and dreams for you. We don't know if Mr. Hatch was ever really loved by the sender of the package, but he was transformed by his faith in his own lovability, his own ability to love. He became the bestower of love for others. In the end, not even his self-doubt would separate him from his identity as a lover. May these little love letters that we send to people we love reinforce their lovability. Day by day, in every way, we need to express and extend the power of love. On this Valentine's Day, I invite you to claim your own identity as a lover. You need not complicate this message by dwelling on definitions or by psychologizing it or researching it or reading about it or analyzing it. Just do it the best you can with all of the mindfulness you can muster every day. Love like an airbag that fills up all the space around it. Love people you find unlovable. Love as though there were no outcome, extravagantly and foolishly if you must. Love the president and the mail carrier and the person who cuts you off for a parking place. Make it active and priceless and assume that others love you as well. Love the earth and yourself and do it with all the kindness and humility and pride you can muster. Happy Valentine's Day. And tomorrow too. Go in peace.
As Janice, Amira, and Miles extinguish the chalice, please join in saying these words. Though the flame is extinguished, we carry with us the warmth of community, the light of truth, and the fire of commitment until we are together again.
Love knocks and waits for us to hear, to open and invite. Love longs to quiet every fear and seeks to set things right. Love offers life in spite of foes who threaten and condemn. Embracing enemies, love goes the second mile with them. Love comes to heal the broken heart, to ease the troubled mind. Without a word, love bids us start to ask and seek and find. Love knocks and enters at the sound of welcome from within.
each other, truly listen to each other, speak what each must speak. Be ready in every moment to disarm your own heart. Rejoice in this love you have begun.